And there we have Congressman Chaffetz, who is expressing a frustration that I think a lot of the American people share right now, which is that there are these hearings about the Obama administration scandals. People are asking questions. People are sworn. They're supposed to be giving honest answers. And we're not getting to the truth. We're not getting the answers that we've been seeking in a number of scandals. But one of them that seems to have fallen off the radar, that seems to have slipped through the cracks of the American people's attention right now, is, of course, Benghazi. A number of questions that continue to linger despite the fact there have been hearings. Very famously, Hillary Clinton at one point said, "What difference does it make?" Well, if we want there to be a difference, we're going to have to find out all of the answers. And people are wondering if that's actually going to happen. Now, there are no hearings scheduled between now and the one-year anniversary of the Benghazi attack on September 11th coming up this fall. But there may be if people begin to poke around and start pointing out that some of the government's positions thus far seem untenable. For example, there is a Marine colonel who could testify but has not yet been able to testify on this issue. He has not been called forward. Now, it's Marine Colonel George Bristol of the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force Trans-Sahara, CJ SOTF TS. Now, he was somebody who would have had very specific and close access to what was happening that night at the operational level. He's a guy who really would have known what was happening on the ground. The Pentagon said he's retired, but he is not yet retired. He is still on active duty. So why hasn't he been called forward to testify? That is one question. Another one that has been raised is that there is this possibility of non-disclosure agreements, additional non-disclosure agreements that have been signed by people who were there. And Congressman Frank Wolf of Virginia, well, he's asking this question himself.
According to trusted sources that have contacted my office, many, if not all, of the survivors of the Benghazi attacks, along with others at the Department of Defense and CIA, have been asked or directed to sign additional non-disclosure agreements about their involvement in the Benghazi attack. Some of these new NDAs, as they call them, I've been told, were signed as recently as this summer.
I can promise you that in the intelligence community, when they ask you to sign an NDA, it is an offer that you cannot refuse. But joining us now to get more details on this is Bill Gertz. He's a senior editor of the Washington Free Beacon and the national security columnist for the Washington Times. Bill, thanks very much for joining us.
Hi, good to be on the program.
Let's start with Marine Colonel Bristol and the fact that he has not yet come out to testify, despite all of the Accountability Review Board, the ARB as it's called, all of this post-event research and investigation that's gone on. We haven't seen this Marine Colonel called forward. It says that he will be placed on the inactive duty list on August 1st. So there seems to be a timeliness issue here if the Pentagon was to call him forward. What details or what can you tell us about what's going to happen with this Marine Colonel and the possibility of him shedding light on what happened in Benghazi?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that the Obama administration is in full cover-up mode as it relates to Benghazi. And the way they're doing that is through their congressional liaison and their public affairs offices, where they have placed, highly politicized political appointees who vet everything first through the White House, through Valerie Jarrett and a few people in the White House. So it's clear to me, having dealt with the Pentagon, that they're trying to block Colonel Bristol from testifying. And he obviously has information that's germane to the investigation. And I think that it's really incumbent upon the investigators in Congress to dig in their heels and really force the administration to play ball and to participate in these investigations. After all, we're talking about the deaths of 4 Americans. This is not a trivial investigation. This is not a political investigation. This is an important national security probe.
So, Bill, this is Amy Holmes here. I don't want to skip over this idea of requiring American citizens to sign non-disclosure agreements. What authority, other than just might and force and muscle, does the government have to tell citizens that they can't speak to their duly elected representatives about events that went on, on their watch?
Well, this is part of the government contractor relationship. In order to be a government contractor, almost in 99% of the cases, a requirement is to get a security clearance. And they use the security clearance because it means if you lose your security clearance, you can't get any work as a contractor. And this, to me, seems this non-disclosure agreement element seems to me part of that system, whereby you make people sign non-disclosure agreements, and and if they don't or violate this non-disclosure agreement, they would lose their security clearance and thus their livelihood. Again, this is something that Congress has to step in and start asking very hard questions. Why are these non-disclosure agreements being put in place? we're doing a duly legitimate government investigation, and we need to talk to these people, and therefore their non-disclosure agreements should not prevent that from happening.
I want to point out to you guys that these NDAs, as we're talking about it, these secrecy agreements, essentially, first of all, the people that they would be talking about in this context probably would have already signed agreements. So these would be additional agreements, which are essentially the government's way of saying, no, we're really serious. Yeah. This is double secret squirrel. But I have to say, we're seeing a pattern here. And this goes to all the stories we're looking at, the Benghazi, IRS, which is that this is government information that the government is saying we would love for the public to know because it's important, but we can't have them telling it because it's secret government information. That's true of the IRS. There's actually non-disclosure issues there. And now we're seeing non-disclosure issues coming to the fore. Why can't either the executive branch or the Congress just say, you know what, if you've got information about X or Y subject, you're just going to be able to come out and talk about it?
And in point of fact, President Obama said he wanted to get to the bottom of it.
He keeps saying
That's
this.
right. He says it. But let me ask Bill. Bill, hi, it's Sarah Carter. How are you, Bill?
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, let me ask you this, Bill. I mean, Colonel Bristol, he would have had information based on his command in North Africa of who would have been available to arrive, correct, in Benghazi. So can't he do a closed-door hearing? I mean, can't Congress call him for a closed-door hearing? It doesn't have to be open to the public. And why aren't they doing that? Have you been able to find anything out about that?
No, but I can tell you my guess is that basically he was on the ground and he knows the situation in terms of the response, the military's response. And we know from earlier testimony before Congress that the military was constrained from making a response. We heard the former defense secretary and chairman of the Joint Chiefs say there wasn't enough time. You know, how did they know there wasn't enough time? They didn't know how long this attack was going to go on. It's clear that they're preventing Bristol from testifying because he has information which could help shed light on this. It's a simple solution. They need to subpoena him. They need to use the power of subpoena and force him to testify. It doesn't matter whether he's active duty or retired, but he's still active duty now. He should be compelled to testify.
I think that stuff like this really goes, and I'm curious, Will, your thoughts on this. I think this really goes to the center of all of these scandals that Congressman Chaffetz was talking about at the beginning, which is a lack of trust in government institutions. How can that continue? How can we continue to have trust in these institutions if the people within them are going to be put under these sort of secrecy binding agreements that they have, prevented from being able to share the information they have? How can we trust them?
Well, we can't. So there's the answer to your question.
And the Pentagon was misleading Congress by saying that this guy was retired.
Nor should we. And that then leads to the usefulness of any of these scandals, the highlighting of that exact issue, that you can't trust government with its own self, much less any kind of higher powers here. But so that also, I'm glad you brought in the other scandals, may they be IRS or whatever, because we talked about Benghazi from early on, that it was not going to reach a point of conclusion. It was not going to reach a point of culpability. It would get lost in the web of government bureaucracy, and that is exactly what we've seen happen. Now, other scandals have also got the attention of Republicans, like the IRS scandal, that can do the same thing you just talked about, Ben, and that is show the inherent distrust you should have in government.
It's noteworthy to point out that even the government doesn't trust the government in some sense. I mean, the reason why they couldn't have, or they wouldn't want to have, the Pentagon wouldn't want closed-door hearings to happen about the timeline is that if there was a bombshell of sorts dropped from that, like, oh, we could have gotten there in 3 hours, right. Guess what? Congress is like a dam made out of Swiss cheese. That's going to be out there in the press within 24 hours. Everyone's going to know about that. So they don't trust each other in this. There's obviously a lot of politics going at this. I said as soon as President Obama was elected, I said at the table down in Dallas, that we're never going to get justice on Benghazi. We may get truth on Benghazi. I think that's seeming to be maybe even too much. We might not even ever get the truth. Bill, I wanted to ask you, do you think that there's going to be any outcry, any means through which we can actually, through the subpoena process of Colonel Bristol or others, are we going to find out all the questions that remain about Benghazi, or are we just going to have to accept that the Obama administration successfully ran out the clock on this one?
Well, no, the key is in Congress. You know, I've written about this extensively. I did a book on this about the government being out of control. The two issues are oversight and accountability. Oversight is the role of Congress. Accountability is in the various IG offices as well as in Congress, and they need to press forward on this investigation. My sense is so far that they have not really conducted a serious investigation. I mean, a bare knuckle, we are going to fight this to the death investigation into what happened here. You know, there's still also the question about the running of guns What was the CIA annex doing there? Were they helping the Turks run guns to Islamists in Syria? So this is a whole other element of that investigation that this whole thing needs to be thoroughly investigated. It needs a special commission. It needs a special counsel. Right. All of those things are needed.
And a really key point, guys, that we shouldn't overlook is that this information could lead directly to the commander-in-chief. Because if you remember, President Obama, he campaigned saying that he asked them to do everything they could, and it looks like he didn't.
That's right.
All right, Bill, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The president mocked Mitt Romney, but didn't he